You know what? This has been something that has been brought up a couple different times by Broadus, and I don't know that we've talked about it here on the show yet. What do you think the chances are that McCarthy finishes the season as the head coach, but not the play caller?
Finishes the season as the head coach, but not the play caller. I don't think so. I don't think very likely.
You think he's just
because of the option?
If he's going to go down, he's going to go down with the ship completely?
I think so. There's no chance. If they give the play calling duties over to run, pass, punt, Brian Schottenheimer, I'm out.
We got to come up with a snappier nickname than run, pass, punt.
Yeah, we got to.
We'll figure it out. But Mike McCarthy is going to be calling the plays this year. He is designing the offense. He is going to be working in tandem with Brian Schottenheimer. Brian Schottenheimer, of course, is the offensive coordinator now and a guy who is going to be heavily involved in everything that they're doing with the offensive side of the football. But he, previous to this, last year, he was a coaching analyst for the Cowboys. And that's kind of a vague term that doesn't really spell out a lot. But what he was doing essentially was the Ben McAdoo role. And Ben McAdoo got an offensive coordinator job out of it, which was, and it's a really smart thing. I'm really interested to find out if there are other teams that do this and whose idea this was. If this was a Mike McCarthy idea or Dan Quinn or whatever else. But basically they had Ben McAdoo and Brian Schottenheimer each week. So last year, for instance, against the 49ers, Brian Schottenheimer's job would have been, okay, so Dan, if I had these personnel and I was the 49ers and I, knowing their tendencies and what I've researched this year, this is the game plan that I would develop for you guys, for the defense. So his job basically was to create mock game plans for the defense to prepare for and study for and tendencies and stuff like that. So he would basically try and say, project out what do I think is the likeliest way that this team is going to attack the defense as an offensive coordinator.
Right.
It's kind of a smart job, I think, to have somebody who he was working mainly with the defense last year, Schottenheimer, because his job was to give them things to prepare for and kind of cross-train. Now, they talk about this a lot, that they'll have sort of guys cross-train rooms a little bit. They'll have coaches go across I cannot remember what they call it, but they'll have coaches sit in with other position groups at times, and basically it's the spread of knowledge and things like that. But
it's a great idea.
Mike McCarthy and Brian Schottenheimer will work in tandem together this year on the offense. And are we saying that's those two, specifically McCarthy, but are those the guys who have the absolute most pressure on them in this organization heading into this year?
From a coaching perspective?
From a building perspective, from the perspective of who is in the building, coach, player, whoever else.
Well, I mean,
because I think if this goes poorly, they are not. Dak is going to be here longer. Dak will be given more opportunities to correct it than McCarthy will. If it goes poorly,
Dak will certainly be given more opportunities to correct it, but
if it goes
don't make
poorly,
any mistake.
He's more likely. I think McCarthy and Schottenheimer are more likely to lose jobs.
Oh, yes, absolutely. No, there's no doubt about that because there's no financial penalty other than paying out the rest of their contract. There's no cap penalty. You cut Dak, there's a cap penalty. You cut Mike McCarthy, there's no cap penalty. So, yeah, it's I would say I would agree with that though. I would agree with that. Although, the amount of pressure Dak's going to have on him, it's always going to be more than anybody else. Now he won't hit the pressure from losing his job is not there, but just the pressure in general is.
Now, there's so much turnover in the running back room this year. Just from the fact that, Ezekiel Elliott is gone, but on the coaching staff as well, they said goodbye to Skip Pete this offseason, a guy who the running back room was very, very high on. And it was an interesting hire. They brought on Jeff Blasco. And Jeff Blasco had been the assistant offensive line coach, and he has actually never coached running backs in his career. So this is the very first time he's coached running backs. He's worked with Mike McCarthy dating back to Green Bay days. He's been here ever since McCarthy took over as the assistant offensive line coach. He is now the run game coordinator and running backs coach directly, though. But does that give you, I know you're a coaching doesn't matter guy, but with his younger room as we're talking about here, and you're trying to get Tony Pollard to step into a void that he's never filled before, which is the guy. And then you have these younger guys that you're trying to develop, Rico Dowdle, Malik Davis, Deuce Vaughn, players like this. Does it give you any pause that they've got a coach at this position that has literally never done it.
It doesn't, and here's why. Like with an O-line coach, there's a lot of technique you're teaching.
Yep.
A lot of the things the running backs do can't be taught.
Yeah.
You're either fast or you're not. You either have good vision or you don't. And you either have good hands or you don't. Now, you can teach blocking technique and you can teach route running, But for the most part, the primary job of a running back is to run. You can't teach field vision, and I don't think. I mean, maybe you can. Maybe I'm wrong. And you can't teach speed.
Jeff Blasco is a guy who had been pretty involved in some of the running game plan already. As the offensive line coach, you're heavily involved in the run game install to begin with because of the blocking concepts and things like that. So he's somebody who had already been involved. I think that's why they viewed it as sort of a natural transition. But he has moved off of assistant offensive line coach. The fact that they moved away from Joe Philbin, he did not get an elevation. Jeff Blasco, he was moved to the running backs, and he didn't get an elevation because they hired Mike Solari. The 68-year-old long-term NFL veteran. This is kind of full circle for him. His very first NFL job with the Dallas Cowboys under Tom Landry.
It was a while ago.
That is a very long time ago. Here's how long it's been since Mike Solari's been in the league. His first job, he coached under Tom Landry.
What year?
It was 87 and 88, the last 2 years.
Okay.
His next job after that, he coached for the Phoenix Cardinals.
Oh, the old Phoenix Cardinals,
who were in the NFC East. And then after that, he moved on. He was with the San Francisco 49ers from 92 to 96, then spent some time with the Chiefs. He was actually the Chiefs offensive coordinator in 06 and 07. But here's the concern. And the connection, by the way, here is he was an assistant offensive line coach for the Packers in 2015, which is when Mike McCarthy was there. And he was also an offensive line coach for a couple of years in Seattle and was familiar with Brian Schottenheimer from there. So it's a Schottenheimer-McCarthy type of hire. But this is a guy who was on the beach, Chop. He was somebody who had been out of the NFL for an entire season and someone who in his last job was let go because Seattle could not block for Russell Wilson. And he's a big proponent of the best five, and that's what he's been talking up a lot this offseason. And so we're going to see what kind of deference he maybe has to certain veterans, how this changes things for certain guys. Josh Ball, for instance. Is Josh Ball more likely to get cut because he doesn't have the coaching staff or the coach, basically, that approved of him getting here? When you look at Chuma Edoga and Awesome Richards and some of these guys that they brought in this year as rookies and veterans, these are guys that have been brought in with Mike Solari's seal of approval. Josh Ball was not one of those guys, and so it'll be interesting to see how that impacts him. Receivers coach, running it back again with Robert Prince, who I think did a nice job last year. Robert Prince and Jeff Blasco are the two most intense coaches on the coaching staff. They are always chirping, always barking, always bringing the energy. It's something that I think they really value in them. Lunda Wells is the tight end coach. Interestingly enough, he was in line or being discussed as the offensive line coach before they hired Mike Solari. And so Lunda Wells is somebody who I think deserves a ton of credit for what he's done here as the tight ends coach in the couple years that he's been here, how he helped bring along Jake Ferguson, Peyton Hendershot. I know he's very excited about Luke Schoonmaker and what he can do. I'm excited to see how Schoonmaker works with him. And then maybe the biggest of the assistant coaches, the non-coordinator positions, Scott Tolzien, the old Wisconsin quarterback, who has been learning here for a couple of years. Played under Mike McCarthy for 4 years in Green Bay, has been an assistant here the first 2 years, an assistant quarterbacks coach. This was the obvious move when they moved on from Doug Nussmeier. When they let Doug Nussmeier go as the quarterbacks coach,
the obvious move because of his relationship with Mike
was Scott Tolzien, because he'd been sitting in that room for the last 2 years being groomed for the job. McCarthy was very high on him. This was going to be an easy projection that Scott Tolzien was the quarterbacks coach, but this is his first year as a primary quarterbacks coach. And it's interesting that you've got somebody guiding the quarterback through this who's worked with Mike McCarthy before. So the fact that he's a rookie coach at the position, I don't think matters nearly as much as his experience for 4 years in McCarthy's system. That they view it as, you're a quarterback, you know how to speak quarterback, you will know how to talk to Dak. You've never coached before, that's fine. You will know how to communicate the concepts and the ideas that I like and that I want to install. and you'll be the perfect person to be that voice.
Yeah, I mean, look, the relationship that a quarterback has with his quarterback coach, I think it's important. Then people always used to ask, what could Kellen teach Tony Romo or Dak? What could he teach? You know what I mean? Even though he wasn't a coach for Romo, he was a backup start. But what could he teach Dak? Well,
Right.
I mean, you don't have to be a better player to be a better coach, to be able to coach somebody.
Well, and think about what that job is when you're a career backup quarterback.
You're basically a quarterback coach.
Your entire job is basically doing advanced scouting, homework stuff. You're preparing to play in case you need to. But a large chunk of what you do is you're
preparing to be a coach.
You're the research assistant for the starter.
You're preparing to be an offensive coordinator, a quarterback coach, whatever it may be, a head coach when you're a backup quarterback. The truckwreck.com text line they have come through with a nickname for Brian Schottenheimer.
What is it?
And about 1 million people have said it on this text line. So it's got to be his nickname already.
What?
R2P2.
Oh my gosh,
run,
perfect.
Pass, and I can't tell you the amount of people that have said this on the text. There is,
oh my gosh,
there's 100 people in a row that have. So it's maybe it's a nickname already. I don't know.
See, I'm a moron because I was just going RRPP. How would we do that? R2P2 is genius. This is why we have the smartest listeners.
This is amazing.
105 through the fan. I feel like a complete idiot. A couple of quick notes because those are the primary coaches that you need to know about offense. We'll do some defensive stuff tomorrow. 2 relevant names on the assistant line, assistant position coaches. Chase Hazlitt, the son of Jim Hazlitt, who's been in-house here for a couple of years as an assistant coach and offensive assistant. Chase Hazlitt is the assistant tight ends coach. He's somebody that I would imagine is being groomed for a eventual full-time position. That's somebody that they think really highly of. And then the quality control offensive assistant is Will Harriger. Now, why does that matter, Chop? Who is Will Harriger? That doesn't sound like it matters very much. Will Harriger matters because he gets loads of credit for being the guy that came last year as the senior offensive analyst working with the quarterbacks out of USC. He gets a ton of credit for internally over at USC. He gets a ton of credit for helping, along with Lincoln Riley, bring Caleb Williams along and turn Caleb Williams into the guy that he is. So this is a guy in Will Harriger that people are very, very high on, has spent some time in the NFL already as an offensive assistant with the Jaguars. He worked with Trevor Lawrence as a rookie, and he had been with the Falcons previously as an offensive assistant working with the running backs. So when you talk about Will Harriger, a guy that they brought on staff here, Chop, this is somebody who his last 2 proteges that he's worked with have been Trevor Lawrence and Caleb Williams, and that seems to be a pretty good track record to bring in here and have working with your quarterback group, especially with Scott Tolzien being a rookie coach.
Great idea.